Narcissism. Gosh, this is a word I know we've all heard, maybe used. And it's a word in and of itself. I think in our society, in our language, personally, I feel it's overused. It can be confusing. And sometimes it's really not all that helpful. But when it comes to addictions and affairs, we do use this word, we hear it, and I think it's worthwhile today that we take some time to address it. I don't believe labels are ever really that helpful, especially when we want to pathologize or just use this one label as the only way to define a person. Because see, when someone's been unfaithful, we can all, I think, agree that whether it be an affair, pornography use, one-night stands, anything that's been illicit and acting out without our spouse knowing about it, this dishonesty has left, this once committed relationship into complete disarray. And what has happened in all of those examples of encounters, it's ultimately very self-serving. It's very selfish. And it's contrary to what we really consider as love. With that being said, when you find out that, your unfaithful spouse has been acting in this way, certainly they have been exhibiting some narcissistic behaviors. But it's really important to say that, this doesn't necessarily make them a true narcissist in the pathological sense of the question. We're really asking, is this person capable of change? Are they ever able to have a secure and safe relationship, if that's what we want? There's so many books and articles out there on the subject of narcissism, and I'm going to share some of those at the end of this article. But when we want to look at a real pattern of narcissism, we're just going to go through a lot of times what some of these patterns look like that can be really damaging and destructive. Because individuals that really exhibit a lot, to a degree of narcissistic behavior, one of the first things you're going to see is these kind of people are very unable to ever really say they're sorry. When confronted, they'll often get really angry, and there's a refusal to take responsibility. It is really worth noting this is different than minimizing and defensiveness that a lot of unfaithful spouses struggle with, especially the first year in recovery. But another kind of narcissistic, really selfish behavior you're going to see of someone that maybe cannot change, I don't know, that they're never going to be able in their life to really have these deep and lasting relationships and friendships. You're going to see a lot of short-term relationships, stops and starts. And maybe they have a lot of acquaintances, but nothing really deep, nothing below the surface of anyone that really truly knows them. Maybe these people have a history of going in and out of therapy, either a lot of therapists because no one's ever the right one, or they just simply won't be committed to getting help or seeing a therapist ever more than a few times without cutting off. And oftentimes, in that lack of taking responsibility, someone that really has a high tendency towards narcissism, they have a really kind of inflated sense of themselves. I think we all can struggle at times that we want to feel special, but truly it's this idea that the rules don't apply to me. Another way that, unfortunately, you're in the midst of a real high degree of narcissism is if someone has a really low threshold for any kind of discomfort or confrontation. They just can't handle it. And maybe they'll act, one way in public, which is really put together in front of others. But sadly, at home or when they're with one person, you'll often see a very different side of either anger or control. Sadly, if you've ever had someone that, kind of hangs up on you on phone calls, or they have a pattern of just cutting you off when things get really uncomfortable and angry, this is a real problem. And, you're going to need a lot of help to get through that. And probably the biggest thing that I know even personally I've seen when I've ever been working with someone with a lot of narcissistic tendencies is they really just don't have any awareness or a sense of empathy for other people. It's just a lack of seeing tears, seeing remorse, showing it towards other people. And I want to just say, it's really hard. We don't want to judge certainly what may be genuine for one person and not another. But sometimes what you'll have is what I just call crocodile tears. And if you've ever been around someone that, they're kind of crying and boohooing their heart out, but you find yourself questioning and you're not feeling anything, it's just really important to ask, I wonder what that's about. Because as humans, what we really want to get after is kind of mirroring one another. If I'm having a conversation with you and you're feeling sad about something, there's a part of me that I should start to feel sad. And so that's a beginning of empathy. And then if, unfortunately, it's you or someone that just has a history of just turning maybe the behavior back on you, this could be a narcissistic trait. What it often looks like in real time is maybe someone really has a problem with control and, you're feeling that you've been in a relationship where you've, been on the end of a lot of controlling behaviors. But instead of the person being able to hear that, what they may say is they'll turn back on you and say, actually, you're the one that's controlling. Or if they're caught in a lie, maybe you'll see them defend and then just tell you, well, you're the one that's lying. Everyone's lying. And so it's just a deeper sense of turning back rather, again, than showing empathy and taking responsibility. It's a hard subject to talk about today, but I just want to remind you guys, we all want to get to a place on either side of recovery where we begin to kind of trust ourselves again. We trust our instincts and our intuition. And something is really off if a lot of these behaviors I've said today are happening. It could be an indicator that, I don't know, I'm not responsible for other people changing, but, that question, what am I dealing with here? We do need to name this pattern of behavior, and it does trend towards a narcissistic side rather than something that's truly reciprocal and what I would call relationship and relational, what we most want. So if you're asking this question, it's going to be really helpful that you stay in community and you just keep asking the question of, what is best for me? What's loving? What am I really dealing with here? We have a ton of really experienced people here in Affair Recovery that are willing to help you navigate if this is what's happening in your relationship. So I applaud you each for even showing up, being willing to grow and learn, and doing the work of asking some of these really difficult questions. And this isn't a question that you're ever going to be able to answer quickly or without really the help and insight of others. Because our goal here is we want each of you to figure out what it means to not only be a safe and secure person, but to find a relationship that's safe and secure. And if you're constantly feeling crazy, just the reminder today, something's very wrong. And we need to pay attention to that.